Hello and welcome to a new video. A couple of weeks ago I posted a video of how I added information from the Down Survey map into Wikidata, and I've taken that further. A little bit of background: so the Down Survey was done in 1655. Obviously people didn't have aerial imagery to draw maps, so they did it all very old school, which means that the maps aren't up to the same standard as we are used to nowadays, where we do have satellite imagery and all kinds of fancy tools. So the townland boundaries aren't necessarily exact, and they might have also changed because maybe streams were the boundary and the stream's course has changed or something like that. But never mind that. This was a very interesting exercise learning about the geography and the history of County Kilkenny, and I just want to explain a little bit of what I've done with the data. So I've added that the way I explained in the previous video. I've gone a little bit further. In the first video, all I talked about, I think, was how I added townland names and maybe subtownlands to Wikidata, and it looks roughly like this. So you try to identify the townland on the Down Survey map, which might have a completely different name or a slightly different name. Maybe I should explain that. So place names are still not really written in stone. Even though we do have maps now, you will find differences between, let's say, Google Maps and OpenStreetMap for various reasons. You will also find different names. As an OpenStreetMap mapper, we're supposed to map ground truth. So that means if we don't get the data from the government like other countries do, we do have to literally go to the place and see if there's a sign with the name on it, which is true for street names as well as for, let's say, schools or libraries. Somebody will get this hint now. Or villages. So for example, Gatabon came up in the conversation yesterday about Irish and English place names, and Gatabon is a village near Freshford, kind of, and apparently it has 3 signs indicating where the village starts, and each sign has a different spelling of the name Gatabon. And this obviously happens when you're trying to replicate Irish names in English when you're anglicizing them. So that is one of the reasons place names might have been pronounced differently in 1655, and the way they represented it in English spelling is different to what we use now. Certain language change might not have taken place then, which has taken place now, and things like that, which is language change in the Irish language as well as in the English language. And we might not represent certain things in a way that they did then. For example, the word town, which is now spelled T-O-W-N, back in the day, they often spelled with an extra E in the end. You might have come across that. You know, ye old Irish town, whatever. If you want to make it sound old, you add an E in the end. You know, that's kind of one of the rules. But because they did do that, there are certain rules for it, I'm sure. But that's what people do. Like, even in ye older, which is already ye, nobody ever said ye. But the older, the E at the end there, you know, that's something you would do. So that's one of the reasons why the names are different. Another reason is that these maps that are provided by Trinity College, they are only copies as far as I'm aware. And they're copied by people, even though some of them it says, I can't remember, one of them did say, truly copied by such and such a name. These people who copied them might not have been locals, so they might not have known the place name. And if you copy handwritten manuscripts, it's kind of a tautology, you will have trouble reading it, especially when it's only a map and not a text. Like in a text, like prose or whatever, you can predict the next word in a way, like large language models do, or, you know, predictive text on your phone in WhatsApp or whatever. You can do that yourself. We all know how to do that. We might not be as aware. But if you're reading a medieval manuscript or any, you know, any handwritten text in terrible handwriting, or not so terrible, you will use those skills to figure out the next word when it's kind of illegible. And that is easy in prose because we can predict text. But if you have a lot of names, like place names or persons' names, that is a lot more difficult, because you can't, unless it's a text about the current king or something, you can't really predict, or a text about the person you're researching, you can't really predict what the name should be. That makes it a lot more difficult to read them. And also for the people who copied these, this was a challenge. And of course, anytime you copy a text, I'm sure you've all experienced that, you will make mistakes. We do have spell check now. They didn't seem to have that back in the day, or maybe they did, and some of the mistakes still slipped through. I'll show you one example here. So this is the parish of Aglish in South Kilkenny, in the barony of Ivark, and it's spelled, and it's still spelled like that, Aglish. And of course, another thing, they use the long S, which is no longer common in the English language. And as a German, I'm a bit more familiar with it because we used it longer, as far as I'm aware. But that can easily be mistaken as an F. And I have seen people do that, transcribe long S's as F's, and the text then makes no sense whatsoever. You just transcribe it as a regular S. But up here is another part of the parish of Aglish, and clearly the copyist forgot the G, and nobody spotted it. So now it reads as Alish, even though it's supposed to be Aglish. And, you know, these things happen. There are a couple, what was the other one? Dunkid. It's another parish. And it might look like Dunkid, but it's actually reads Dunkill. There are 2 lines here. They're just auxiliary lines to help with the lowercase letters. And that might look like the T's are crossed, but I'm fairly sure it's 2 L's. They did mean to say Dunkid, but whoever copied it, Kill is a much more common part of Irish place names, so they probably thought, oh, it's probably supposed to read Kill. So they copied it as Dunkill when it's supposed to be Dunkid. So these are some of the challenges. I try to copy them as truly as possible. Even, for example, I just see that here, Davidstown. V and U are often interchangeable in the Middle Ages. So this is clearly a U, but it's supposed to be read as a V. But I still copied it as a U, which makes it more difficult to search for, because you have to know that it's supposed to be Davidstown. But I did try to copy it as truly as possible, even though I was fully aware that they made a mistake there. But if you want a true representation of the Down Survey map, you have to copy it as close as possible. There are some cases where, I think only 2, where they use the SZ, which is still a German letter. So an SZ is a ligature between a long S, like here, and a Z. It's just one letter in German. And I did use that as well. It's Alt 0223, I think, to get that. If you did German in school, you might be familiar with it. It's probably not that easy to learn. I think it's a little easier now after the spelling reform of whenever that was. I was still in school, 1996 or 7 or 8. It made it a bit more logical. Because grammar is actually logical, believe it or not. So anyway, I'll go and show you what I've done with the data. This is just some of the challenges that you face when you're copying manuscripts or maps. I will probably touch upon other ones as well. So what I have done after I've put all this data into Wikidata, because I like visualization to keep me motivated, and maybe I should stop doing that because it was like a 3-week rabbit hole, which I would have really liked to leave earlier, but I was too far in and I thought I should finish it. Just a little bit of background. After I posted the video, the first one, all these maps were no longer available on the TCD website for some reason. The day after I posted the video, it was gone, and I was getting a bit paranoid, but I was just hoping it had to do with the Christmas holidays, and I seem to have been right, because on the 7th of January, when I think the semester might have started again, or, you know, people were back, the university staff was back, and I had also sent them an email, it was back. So that was good, and I could continue, but it was 3 weeks, roughly, that I've worked on this, and not like half an hour a day. I'm talking about easily 10 hours a day. I'm a little bit obsessive. So what I've done then is extracted all the data again from Wikidata, which might seem a bit pointless, and put it into a umap. So umap is a French platform where you can create your own custom map and publish it under an open data license, because it is mostly based on OpenStreetMap. The background maps are. Wherever you get your data from, you have to find the copyright license for that. Some of you might have made custom maps on Google Maps, but umap gives you a lot more options. I haven't used Google Maps in probably 15 years for that purpose, but I'm fairly sure umap gives you a lot more options. So you have a lot of background maps to choose from. I usually end up using this one because it's the least intrusive, it's the least detailed one, which is sometimes what you want. If you look at it as a visitor, so to speak, you can choose them here. This just folds out on the left, and you can choose a different map if you want more detail. If you want to see your house in relation to the data that is represented here, for example. And then you can add different layers. I'm not going to compare it to Google Maps all the time because I don't really know what you can do on Google Maps anymore. Just tell you what the features are here. So you can add different layers, which you can see here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 layers now. I had it all in one layer at the start, but putting it in different layers gives you more possibilities to play around with the data and to visualize it in different ways. I think I'll go through the layers and explain what you can do and what I have done and all that kind of stuff. So when you, I'll just refresh the page. When you open it up, and it obviously look different on your phone, it opens it at zoom level 10, which looks like this on my screen, and it opens the data browser on the left. This is stuff you can turn on and off when you create a map on umap. You can turn on the zoom extent and the zoom level and whatever things you want to pop up at the start and so on. So I've done it like that. If you don't like it, if you have suggestions, please put them in the comments. So you see that some of them are activated, some of them are deactivated. So villages, and the number in brackets means that's how many data points, I guess there are, data items, whatever you call them. 87 castles, which does sound like a lot, but I think I missed a few. Parishes, 89. I might have also missed a couple there, especially in northern Kilkenny. And 17 rivers. So this is all information that is on the Down Survey map. The first layer that you can see is not active, but I will activate it, or I'll show you how it activates. So I thought because there's 784 townlands now and subtownlands, that would overcrowd the map too much. There's already a lot of overlapping going on here, and it's not very pretty. So I thought I'll deactivate them at this zoom level, and instead it only appears at zoom level 10. It's in the address. You can see the zoom level is 10, and if I zoom into 11, all the townlands and the 2 subtownlands appear. And there's still some layers that will only appear at the next zoom level 12, like churches, bridges, and mills, and the old townland boundaries, which are very few. I might delete that layer eventually, which only appears at level, I don't know, 13 or something. So the townlands and subtownlands. This is something I already talked about in the first video. So if I go over to Wikidata, this is what that looks like. You try to find the townland. The best thing I should have done was go by barony, zoom in on the barony, and then work my way around until I think I've finished all the townlands and also the parishes, and then move on to the next barony and so on. And sometimes you get more detailed maps when you open the barony or even the parish. Sometimes you don't. I don't know how they chose that at Trinity College. So you find your townland wherever it is, and you try to find the same townland on Wikidata, which in the case of Kilkieran, you can imagine it's not that easy because there's a lot of Kilkierans. Even in Kilkenny, there's at least 2. It's even worse for places called Newtown, or Newrath, or Rathpatrick, or Kilpatrick. All these, where you have loads and loads and loads of the same name in one county. But you have to go, either go by, here it only says Townland and Kilkieran, County Kilkenny. It would have maybe helped if it said, this is probably in Goran, if it said Townland and Kilkieran, Barony of Goran, County Kilkenny. Sometimes it'll say the electoral division, which I don't really know much about. Like if somebody said it's Kilkieran in the electoral division of, I think it's Castlecomer, whatever, like that wouldn't really help me terribly. And you might still, because electoral divisions can be quite large, so can baronies, you can still have the same townland name in the same barony or electoral division. So you just have to find it either through the description, or you can scroll down. They should all have their coordinates, and then you mightn't be able to tell from this one, because this is just fields and roads and rivers. You have to know your county really well to recognize it from this. Maybe zoom out and see, okay, it's the one near Ballyfoyle, so that's the one I wanted. Or you can click on the coordinates and it'll open a new tab with different choices of maps, including OpenStreetMap, obviously. And then down here, this is what I explained in the last video, you have the property described by source, and I used Down Survey because it's the Down Survey. And then I added the qualifier subject named as, and then the name it has on the Down Survey. I'm not going to zoom in on Kilkieran. Now it's here somewhere. And then what I decided, like halfway in, 3/4 into the project, was to add other details that are depicted on the Down Survey map. Like, it has a watermill, which is usually just called a mill or something on the Down Survey map, but it'll be a little building with a tiny little water wheel indicated, and it's usually next to a river. You do get a couple of tower houses next to rivers, but they won't have a water wheel. So either you go by the picture, by the icon, or you go by when it says a mill. In 2 cases, it went into more detail. It said a tuck mill or a corn mill, but usually it's just a mill, at least in County Kilkenny. When it was a castle, which we'll get to, or a church, I wanted to link the actual entry. If I click on, just to explain it better, maybe I'll click on Watermill, open this in a new tab. This will just explain generally what a watermill is, okay? And maybe a picture as an example, and where that they also have their own described by source property and all that kind of stuff. So it gives you an explanation, machine readable and human readable explanation of what a watermill is. But what you can also do, and that's the beauty of linked open data, or even just the beauty of Wikidata, is you can create entries for each castle, each church, and link that here. Kilkieran does no longer have a church. Obviously it did, because it's called Kilkieran, but I guess it wasn't marked on the Down Survey map, or maybe I overlooked it. So I could have linked that here. And then sometimes the townlands have either a stream as a boundary or a stream running through. Obviously when it has a watermill, it needs a water course. So I added stream as well. Sometimes if it is a townland that borders on the River Nore or the River Barrow or the King's River or whatever, and I wasn't super consistent with that, to be honest, I did add a link to that specific river as well. And then you get a reference. Most of them will have 2 references, because, especially the ones in South Kilkenny, because I use this map here, which is the overview map of County Kilkenny, which strangely has more information than the ones that are supposed to be more detailed. You get a lot more townland names crammed into this one than if you go into the barony maps or even the parish maps. I'll show you an example for that. Hopefully I can find it. So, for example, Inishtig, which you might know from previous videos of mine, is marked here, Inishtig Town and Liberties. And it's marked here, so the River Nore is here, and you can see it's indicated as having a city or a town wall. In Wikidata speak, it would be city wall. but you can also type in anything you can type up here. You can also type in here because it's all linked. So if I typed in town wall, it'll give you the main label here, city wall, and then a description, and then alternative names for it, which could be urban defense, town wall, village wall, city wall, walls, or wall. I'm not sure about the wall bit, but anyway. So if I wanted to add that to Inishtik, which I can't remember if I did, I hopefully did, I would add that here under has parts city wall, even though it's only a town. Now it's probably only a village, no offense. And then it seems to have, if you look closely, seems to have towers all around, and some of them are probably gates because you have to get in and out. Sometimes, rarely, there are roads indicated as well. For example, for Callan, it does have, they're now called Clonmel Road and West Street, I think. They might have subdivisions, like Clonmel Road, I think, is called Green Street. It's just a continuation. Bridge Street, Green Street. Maybe it's even Clonmel Street, I don't know. And West Street on the Down Survey map is called Cashel Road because it leads to Cashel. And it does have two, or at least one town gate indicated at the end of the road that leads into Mallardstown parish, or Whitechurch parish, whatever it's called nowadays. It's called all kinds of things on the Down Survey map, like 6 different names. So I would add has parts city wall, and I could create an entry on Wikidata called for Inishtik city walls as well and link that specifically. And I could add city gate, or whatever it's called. And in Kilkenny, I have actually created for some of the gates, like Talbot's Tower. It's not a gate, it's a tower. But one of the townlands indicated Talbot's Tower. So I added that as part. This townland, which has a different name now, has part Talbot's Tower. Or, I don't know, one of the other gates. They're not named on the Down Survey map, but I know which ones they are. So there's a bit of adding information to make it, I think, more usable, rather than just saying has a town gate, to add the actual gate to it, the name. And then within there are little buildings indicated, like a little cottage maybe, and it's very hard to tell what they are. Another thing, for example, here, Clun, you see that hopefully you can see that this font is slightly different than those. And it took me a while to figure that out, but that means that this is the parish name, because it saved them, like we do nowadays with map, we use different fonts, and they've done that for ages, to save you saying parish of Clun, or the parish of Clun, which they do on some of the barony maps and the parish maps. But here they didn't really have the space, so they used a different font. It's slightly bigger and it's kind of more straight, whereas the townland names are kind of smaller and slanted. And then you have a little thing indicated here, which is supposed to be a building. At first I thought they were all tower houses, but it actually turns out when you go into the barony maps and the parish maps that this symbol can stand for a whole settlement if you go in and suddenly there's 4 little buildings indicated on the barony map. But it can also mean church, or tower house, or fortified house. It can mean all kinds of things. It just means building. There is a building there. A more or less substantial building. Some of I think it was in Galmoy, I can't remember exactly, it'll even say a chimney house or attached cottage or something like that when you go into the barony or the parish. So this is the information. Oops. It has to be defined as a townland. Turn up here as one of those dots. And it has to be in County Kilkenny, so I had to add that for quite a few of them. And it has to have GPS coordinates here. And there are a lot of townlands that are they were split since the Down Survey maps were made, or they were merged into bigger townlands. So you often get townland name upper, townland name lower, or big and moor, and all these kinds of things. Sometimes you get all four of them, or you get north, east, south, west, or something like that. And sometimes what was two townlands is now one townland, maybe because the population went down so much, or I don't know. Or the ownership changed and then they changed the whole name. I mean, they changed whole names all the time. I hinted at that in the first video as well, where the ownership of the land, equally townland, changed, and the whole name of the townland changed with it. Sometimes it's because there's an example in near Freshford. It's now called Acragar, and I think I didn't find it on the Down Survey, to be honest, but I was looking at the Ormond deeds, and there it's called Le Short Acre. And if you know a bit of Irish, and I have just enough Irish to understand that, Acragar is just Irish. It's the cut acre, like short and cut is the same word in Irish as far as I know. Gear, I think. So Acragar is the same as Le Short Acre. I don't know why they use a French article there, but that's what they do in the Ormond deeds sometimes. So that's the townlands. That was obviously the most work. As you can see, there are 784 of them. So that is that layer. I'll turn that off now. Then we have the next layer is, I called it villages. And obviously there were more villages at the time of the Down Survey. But it's sometimes a bit difficult to tell, are they talking about a townland or the village name? Sometimes it's more clear, and it doesn't necessarily only mean village, it can also mean town or city in the case of Kilkenny, which doesn't have a red dot, as you can see. But by the time of the Down Survey, Kilkenny was a city. But for example, Thomastown, I think it is marked as a town with a town wall and stuff like that. And then Inishtig Town is actually called Inishtig Town, and it is, as you saw, has a town wall. It's very few villages with a town wall. Or New Ross, which is technically not in Kilkenny, I just wanted to include it. It's called Rosstown there. It's called Ross Pond in the Ormond deeds a lot of times. And then Callan has 3 different names on it. So Callan with an I, and Callan Town. So it's clearly also meant to be understood as a town, not just a townland. Is there actually a townland called Callan? I don't think so. No. Like Westcourt and whatever they're called. Dunnamagan, see, I would not understand Dunnamagan as a town, but that's me being from the continent. But they call it Dunnamagan's Town, so they understood it as a town. I don't think it had town walls because they're not indicated. They might also mean Dunnamagan Townland when they say Dunnamagan Town. It's very hard to say. But on Wikidata, it is defined as a human settlement or a village or something like that. Yeah, so there's only 10, even though on the Down Survey map, if you zoom in, or not zoom in, but if you go into the barony maps or even the parish maps, you will see clusters of buildings, and that indicates a settlement. What I've done with that is, Kilkieran is not a good example. I can't think of one now. I'll just have to see if one that I choose to use has it. No. I would have human settlement just as the general, just to indicate that there is a settlement indicated on the map. I have not extracted that into the townlands because I don't know how to do it. I'm sure it is possible, because it would be very similar to extracting the subject named as, because it's the same level, but I don't know how to do that. So that's the villages. That's not really that exciting. And then we have churches, which is, as it says, they're incomplete because I kind of seem to have missed quite a few, as you can see in North Kilkenny, but in South Kilkenny I had them because I started in North Kilkenny and I hadn't really figured out the way to do it yet, my methodology. And by the time I got to the baronies of Ida and Ivork, I think I had figured it out, so I have to go back if I want to complete it. So most of the churches, I'll just turn the parishes off as well, most of the churches have this purple circle around them, but you'll see that some of them have like a dark orange brown circle around them. On umap the color is called chocolate, but it's very bright chocolate. And that means that I could not find them on the historic environment viewer. So they might be churches that are not recorded by the National Monument Service. Caveat here is that they did look at the Down Survey maps, but they used different parts of it. That's what the lady who I usually correspond with said. They might have had more of the parish maps, which I don't often, they're not here. Some of the parish maps are on this. And then also they had the, I don't know how to pronounce it, is it called Terrier? Where they have it for, I think, one of the baronies. I've seen it. Or was it Kilkenny, actually? So you get the... might have to go... Yeah. So you get the map of the parish. And then down here you get a list of all the townlands and who owned it and how large it was. And possibly... Yeah, and their religion. So IARP means Irish Papist, I think. I might be wrong there. I haven't really looked into that. But I did actually add the religion to some of the townlands where it said, especially when it's Protestant land, it'll just say Protestant land and won't give you any more detail because I guess their mission had already been completed, taking land off the Catholics. So they didn't need all that detail. But I did add that here in the qualifiers. I think it's called religion or worldview, and I put in Protestantism. So for a couple of them, especially I think in Galmoy or somewhere, you will find that, but it's not, it doesn't always say that. I guess it's implied then that they're not Protestant owned, but I didn't do that. So the other ones, with the purple ring, if you click on them, you get the SMR number. And with the ones with the brown ring, you won't get the SMR number, which is, in case that's not clear, is all fed from Wikidata. So if I click open the Wikidata entry for a Tubrid church, it's a bit strange that I wouldn't have an SMR number when it's still in ruins. Don't quite get that. But it should have a property here, sites and monuments records or something, and then the number. A lot of them I had to create from scratch on Wikidata to be able to do this kind of thing. Those two I think existed already because I've actually been on site, and usually when I've been on the site I have created the Wikidata entries already, but there was a lot of extra work that I did not anticipate. So I might have to check that, why that doesn't have an SMR number when it's still in ruins. It might also be that the people who work for the National Monument Service are more focusing on this kind of area for reasons that might be too personal to mention in a YouTube video, and they haven't gotten down to all this yet. I don't know. The next layer then are the castles. And there's 87, and again I might have missed some in North Kilkenny, especially here. And the same is true, the same color coding is true here. The brown ones are ones that are not on the historic environment viewer, which does not necessarily mean if you go into it into the historic environment viewer and you zoom in onto this, you could actually, if you right click on this, maybe I should have said that, you can permalink to this feature on the umap. You can get a layer permalink. I haven't used all of these options. But you get the GPS coordinates here, and you can copy them by just clicking on it. And if you open the historic environment viewer, then so you can paste that in here and search for it, and it'll jump to that location. And if you have the sites and monuments records layer activated here, which it is activated because you have these 2 red dots, but where I locate this Keltrath castle is roughly here. I might be wrong. And you can see there is no townland called Keltrath, but it's somewhere here. It's east of Kells Priory. It should be roughly here, and there's nothing indicated, but that does not mean it's not on the HEV necessarily, because there are a lot of 8,000 plus monuments. If you zoom out a lot, so when they don't know where a feature is located, because they only read about it or saw it in the Down Survey map and there's no trace above ground, or if they read it, you know, some local historian wrote something about it, like for Kilkenny, Carrigan says there's reputedly locals tell of a church at in this field called the Killen Field. This happens a couple of times, and Killen in this case means kill for church. They put it at coordinates 00 rather than putting it somewhere where it isn't on the map. They still put it somewhere where it isn't. I hope this works now. I don't know. Usually there are ways of finding them. I can't. There's a clump of red dots somewhere here in the middle of the ocean. Don't know why it doesn't do that now. At coordinates. Oh, it's because it doesn't do the. Because the 00 is on the Irish Transverse Mercator, and I'm using GPS. Obviously, that doesn't work, so I have to. So this is a useful website in case you didn't know. irish.gridreferencefinder.com, where you can put in coordinates into any grid system that has any relation to Ireland, and it'll convert it into whatever you want it to convert to. So 00 on the transverse Mercator is. Hopefully this works now. Please work. Yeah, so you can't see that it's the ocean, but it is the ocean because the coordinates, you can see it here. So 00 in the Irish Transverse Mercator are these coordinates in GPS. And if you click on this now, you'll see that there are 8,001 monuments in this location. These are all monuments that the National Monument Service are aware might exist. There might be some mistakes there as well. So they just put them there, and I have checked against those. I won't explain how I did that. I didn't go through 8,001, but I thought I had checked through all the churches and castles and mills doing this. Anyways, that was quite a side quest. So these are the castles that they possibly don't have, unless I've located them in the wrong townland, or they've located them in the wrong townland because the old maps or the description, the location description, isn't as precise as you would wish it to be. Then we have the parishes, which I also might have missed some in North Kilkenny. And they are shown with these larger circles with the cross in the middle. And when you hover over them, it'll display the name that you find in the Down Survey, and there could be more than one, depending on the levels of maps. So here you can see you have the parish of St. John's in Kilkenny, the parish with double R of St. John's, and then you have all the neighbouring parishes as well. The parish of Canis, the parish of St. Patrick's, barony of Goran, I don't know why they didn't do the parish there, and the barony of Fasadinen there. And there's the River Nore, which is partly the boundary between the parishes. And if you go into the parish of St. Canis, it might be spelled different, and that's why there are different names sometimes. Sometimes it won't have the parish of in front of it, or sometimes it will have the name of the parish and then parish after or whatever. Especially here, some of them have the parish afterwards. I guess it depends a bit on the spacing on the map or something, I don't know. The next layer then are bridges. It's not an awful lot, but there are a couple of bridges marked on the Down Survey map because they're obviously very important to get from A to B. And some of the locations of the bridges nowadays correspond with the ones that are on the Down Survey map, and some of them don't. Examples where they might, I think Thomastown, it might correspond, but I'm not entirely sure. And the one in Freshford has two bridges now, the old bridge and the new bridge. And the old bridge is not that old, it's from the 1700s, I think, but it might be the location of the original bridge over the Nuena River. And the Nuena River, I'll get to rivers later on. And somewhere it certainly doesn't correspond to today's bridges are in Kilkenny, so you might be familiar with Green's Bridge, which used to be slightly further north, and if you stand on the new Green's Bridge, which is not that new, but compared to the medieval one it is, and it's low water, you can still see the piers of the old bridge in the water. So the Green Street went this way here and then up Brokemakers Hill, I guess, or maybe Greens Hill. And the same with John's Bridge, which collapsed. Some of them, just a lot of them, actually collapsed during floods, and then they were rebuilt sometimes in a different location. So the old John's Bridge was here, and the newer, which is already its second iteration, I think, News Bridge was built here. And the same in Graignamanagh, so you're probably familiar with the bridge in Graignamanagh, very picturesque. But the original bridge was apparently down here and has actually two SMR numbers because it has a Kilkenny number and a Carlow number. Anyways, so that's the bridge layer, and then I related to that in a way is mills. So there are quite a few mills marked on the Down Survey map, not as many as they were, probably, but I think it's really interesting to see how they used sustainable power in the past, and some of those locations also survived until probably the early 20th century. And then we decided we knew better and didn't use water energy anymore. So some of the rivers have more than others, like the King's River seems to have 4 on the Down Survey map. And some of the streams that have mills marked on them, you think, how could they ever turn a mill wheel? But apparently they did. And some of them are on the historic environment viewer, like this one here. Not in this location. This is one of the cases where it is in the ocean, but I've just located it where I think it was. And I've given it the name of the townland I think it was in, or where it's indicated on the map. Sometimes they seem to move from one side of the river from one map to the other, but I presume that's just copying mistakes. Yeah, and you can see that in some cases the stream doesn't even seem to be indicated much on the Down Survey map, otherwise I would have added it. But the mill is still there. I think that layer still needs a lot of work as well. And then a very important layer are the rivers, and those are rivers and some streams depicted on the Down Survey map. And some of them are named on the Down Survey map, especially the larger ones like the Barrow and the Nore, and they all have all kinds of different spelling variations. I didn't really focus much on the Barrow, but the Nore, there's at least 3 spelling variations of it. The King's River only has the one, the River Rye, or Ree, I guess. And then there's some streams that we don't have names nowadays. At least I haven't found any on Ordnance Survey maps or asking locals. We might still find out eventually, but maybe they're just not important enough anymore because you don't have mills in them, you can't really fish in them because they're just too shallow to do really anything with them. So there's no reason to name them. It's just another stream that isn't of any importance. But back in the day, a lot of the rivers were boundaries. And if you, especially in the Ormond deeds, I keep bringing this up because in my hiatus, when I couldn't use the Down Survey maps, I went into Ormond deeds. It'll describe the boundaries, or what's called the mera in early modern English or Middle English of a townland, and it'll say it reaches in the east from the River Nore to the land of Thomas Churchill, which is so useful because we don't know where Thomas Churchill lived, but the Nore is still there, so we do have that as an indicator. And sometimes it'll just say, I remember this from Lister Lynn, it'll just say the townland, the mirror runneth from the water that runneth into the Nore to whatever, but there's never ever a name given in the Ormond Deeds or in the Down Survey, which is unfortunate. But there's one stream marked, which I think is quite interesting, and I haven't found the modern name for it. It's in the parish of Kilmanna, and it's called the Brook of Moyna in the Down Survey map, and it's a tiny stream. I think I haven't actually seen it in real life, but I think it's not significant at all, and I have asked locals and they don't know what it's called, if it still has a name. But I think the reason why it is named on the Down Survey map might be because the butlers of Ormond used to live in Pottlerath, which is here, and this stream is the boundary of the townland of Pottlerath, so of their land, or part of their land, so it was important to record this. That's just my theory why it is named. I also find it interesting, like, that Moyna is not that far removed phonetically from Kilmanna, which is the Church of the Monks. I'm just wondering if there's any connection. My Irish isn't good enough to make a judgment on that. If anyone wants to educate me on that, put it in the comments. So these are the layers that are available on the map, and obviously I haven't said this before, obviously I will link this map down below in the video description, and you can turn them all on or just some of them. I'll go in on the zoom level. You won't see all the layers. Some of them are sensitive to the zoom level. This is something you can set up in umap, which I think is quite handy. So the last bit to appear, I think, are the old townland boundaries, which I only drew here in Kilkenny because it was so difficult to figure out where the townlands were. I might delete that eventually, because I won't complete it. It would be an impossible task to draw in all the townland boundaries as they were in the Down Survey, especially with a lot of the more detailed, so-called more detailed maps not having north at the top. I guess there's probably a way to do it. Screen grab and rotate or something. Oh, here's actually the one where it says, I think I mentioned that earlier. An exact copy by Dan O'Brien. Something. Surveyor, probably. SUROR, surveyor. So Dan O'Brien or O'Brien. I don't know how exact it is, and they don't all say their exact copy, so maybe that's their excuse. I don't know. Sometimes if you see a kink like that, shush. If you see a kink like that in the townland boundary, you might still be able to match it up with today's townland boundaries. It might not be exactly that shape because they didn't have the tools we have nowadays, like aerial imagery and stuff like that. But it does help to locate castles, for example. Like if you go, we say it's just north of this kink and you go up, and you know, that's what I did anyway, to locate the castles that are not on satellite imagery. And where I had to kind of guess, okay, so it's kind of this line between this kink and where these two meet or whatever. I've also added 2 filters, but I've actually already partly talked about that, which you can do in umap. If you go into the layers here on the right, you have to be an admin for that map though. You have the layers here again, and you can change all the settings for the layers here, and you can also change the visibility here, and you can delete them. I won't click that would be terrible. But for example, for the castles, so you have the Wikidata link, the SMR number, where they have an SMR number, and the name, which is mostly the modern name, or kind of made up modern name. And you can see here that some of them don't have SMR numbers. I think I mentioned that before. And you can add a filter for that, which I've already done, so it doesn't give me that option. It only gives me the option to edit the filter for this field. But if I go over here into the user interface, so to speak, and click on filters, it'll open the two filters, and I've named them mills with or without SMR number and castles with or without SMR number. I might have to rename that because it's a little bit confusing. I'll just turn the parishes off as well, and the villages, because we really only need the castles. So they are color coded by has SMR number or does not have SMR number. The ones without SMR number have the brown ring around them, but I could also not have done that and only use the filter. So if you see it's set to unset now, if I click on yes, it should only show me the castles that do have an SMR number. You see all the ones with the brown circle disappeared. And on the contrary, if I click on no, it should only show me the castles that I have not found an SMR number for. To say it diplomatically, I might have to go over them all again and see if maybe they are in the ocean, if you get me. Because if they're not, they're all potential reports to send to the National Monument Service. It's not something I'm looking forward to. And I could have done the same for the churches, but they are already color coded, so I didn't really see a need for that. I did do it with the mills. So the mills, I didn't say that earlier on, the mill layer does not come from Wikidata. I only added them manually, because to have them from Wikidata, to extract them from there, I would have to add them to Wikidata first, and I haven't done that yet. I might do that for the ones that have an SMR number, because they're probably considered relevant enough. I don't know about the other ones. So they're not color coded. They all have a blue circle for water, and the icon is actually the icon for Buddhism, but it looked close enough to a watermill, so I thought I used that one. So these are the ones that have an SMR number according to this. It's quite a few. And these are the ones that don't. And I might have made mistakes, or the National Monument Service might have made mistakes. Who knows? So these are two that actually have their function labeled on the Down Survey: an old tuck mill and a corn mill. So the other ones are all just called a mill, if even that, if they're not just a little icon depicting a mill. Maybe you want to see what it looks like. So if you click on it, you get the SMR number, as I said, and then the link to the scan of the Down Survey map. Just trying to remember where it is, because of course I can't really use GPS coordinates, but it's in, I think it's in Shillore, if that's how it's pronounced. So it's here. So you can see here it's called Comerford's Grange Mill, which it isn't called any longer that. I think it's just called Grange something. And this is the symbol for the mill there. It's not even exactly by the river, but sometimes they just, like, even those little indicators of buildings, they aren't necessarily where they are in the townland. They're just where it fitted with the writing, unfortunately. But if I went into this barony, I think that it is actually shown next to the river. Now, I think it's Burnchurch Parish. I've lost my bearings now, because I'm partly expecting the up not to be north, but it is actually on this one. So so this is the parish of Burnchurch, and the mill is on this side of the river. On this map, I don't really have the river on this one, so So it might be on this side of the river, or it might be this river as well, or stream. Very hard to tell which one it is. But there is a mill somewhere there. I think they have it in Burnchurch on the Historic Environment Viewer. But this is what it looks like. I'll zoom in a little bit more. So you have a tiny little building, and there's the mill wheel. I hope you can see that. And then it does say a mill. Sometimes it's just spelled with one L, and sometimes it's just a M dot, or sometimes it's not labeled at all, and all you get is the little icon of a mill, and you have to look really closely. Same with the churches. Sometimes all you get is a little enclosed area. I don't know if GL, if that's supposed to mean glebe. And then you have this little symbol for a church is just, I think it's a C with a little cross on top. Sometimes it's a bit easier to see. But sometimes you have, I can't remember where that was, somewhere in South Kilkenny, you have a townland and it has 3 of these. And I'm like, no way does it have 3 churches. I don't know what it means then. The high cross? I don't know. There are no high crosses there now. Here's another mill in Ennisnag. And the bridge as well. This is not the Ennisnag Bridge, I'm fairly sure. This is the older bridge in Ennisnag. I think it's locally called Freeney's Bridge. And then you have a mill there somewhere in Ennisnag. I think the modern bridge is more like here somewhere. And going back to some of the spelling mistakes, Botty Castle, I think it's supposed to read Booley Castle, because this is the townland of Cotterell's Booley. You just have to believe me, because it's in October Barony, so they don't have all that detail. But the Cotterell family must have had a castle in Cotterell's Booley, but it's completely leveled. Nobody really knows where it was, unfortunately. But that's Botty Castle doesn't make any sense when it's in the townland of Cotterell's Booley, which was previously just known as Booley. If you look at the Ormond deeds and you look for Cotterell's Booley or Booley, you'll see that before it was owned by the Cotterells, and even I think sometime after they had acquired it, the townland was still just called Booley. And Cotterell's Booley is a more modern name, named after the family who owned it. I don't want to go into too much technical detail as regards to Wikidata or umap, because that might be just too technical. I just really wanted to show that it is possible to extract data, and I haven't explained how to do it. I will in a follow-up video, how to extract the data from Wikidata again and get a GeoJSON file, which is basically what I used, lots of GeoJSON files, and imported them into umap and played around with the, I keep forgetting what it's called, conditional style use. So you don't have to change every townland's default symbol to this one. You just define that all the data points in a layer. I can show you that briefly. I'm gonna go into the townlands. But if you separate them by layers, you can just define the shape of the data points in that one layer, and once you import the data, they'll all look like that. So it's defined as a circle now, but you also have default, which I thought was just too big, or a large circle, which is what I used for the parishes, if you compare that, but I still thought that was too big. Or drops, again, too big, didn't like that. Or ball, or still too big, I think, or none, which is just a white circle. So I went for circle, and then you define, well, first you define the color. There's quite a choice there. For some of the icon shapes, you can change the icon size as well. And the icon symbol, this is where I use for the church, the parishes, castles, bridges. It's actually just a bench because it didn't have a symbol for bridge, but it looks, it looks a bit like a bridge. And the Buddhist icon, which I used for the mill wheels. And then you can change the opacity of the icons as well. And for certain ones, this doesn't apply to dots, but for the rivers, for example, you can change the width of the line, which is not adjustable by zoom level. Unfortunately, that would be nicer, but you know, it's still pretty good. So if you go into the shape properties for the rivers, you can still see that here with the weight, I can change how thick I want the rivers to look. Oh shit, no, I can't remember what I had. Like this maybe. And also the fill opacity is at 0.3 now. Oh, that's not, must be opacity. Yeah, so you can make it more transparent and less transparent. Oh, I can't remember what I had. 0.5 maybe. And also, as you can see, that the name appears when I hover over it. That's also something you can set up. I might go into that again in the next video. Let's go for the townlands again. I think it's interaction options. So when you click on it, it'll open a little window with the name in the Down Survey map. It's the same name that is displayed here. And then the modern name, which it gets from Wikidata, of course, and the link to this townlands Wikidata entry. And what you want displayed here in this window, you define here. And it's done with placeholders. That gets the data from the table here. Okay. Where was I? Yeah, so the interaction options. So that's the pop-up, and then you can display the label always, which I thought was too much. Yeah, so you can't really see anything. I thought that was not useful, or never. So you have to click on the dot to have the pop-up, and I didn't like that either. I wanted to have it quicker, so I set it to unhover, so when you hover you see the name, but you can still click on it. I haven't really looked at those ones. Yeah. What I thought about and then decided against is it only works for the rivers. Line decoration. So you can have, because in a lot of modern maps you get the name of the river displayed along the river, following the course of the river, and I could have done that here. I just didn't like the way it was displayed, and I think I would have to use the placeholder again, which is done with the wavy brackets, and then I guess name. Yeah, and then you see it displays the names for the river, and it's just so overlapping and ugly, and you can't change the like the font or anything like that. You can rotate the text and you can change the text size, but it's always going to be the same size no matter what the zoom level is, and I didn't like that. There's something that is better in QGIS, but QGIS is just another level of technical demands that I'm not I would be able to learn, but I just didn't want to go with QGIS. Or you can move the text position to the start and center. I'm not quite sure what that does. And the offset, and I thought there was, you can just have it displayed once. I don't really see what the point of that is, and it's not very legible either. So I decided to not use line decoration. You could do that if you made a map of townlands, or that might get messy because usually one boundary, you have to have it on either side. I don't know. There's probably use cases for that. Bus lines or something. Yeah, I think that's the little technical stuff I want to go into. I might go into it again. I might have also done it in previous videos, because umap is becoming better and better, but it's also, of course, getting more complex. If you want to be able to do more stuff, you have to learn how to do more stuff, basically. So start simple with simpler maps, I guess. I hope that was a little bit interesting and enlightening, and maybe made you curious to look up your own townland or even town or village on my little map, which again I will put in the description below. Of course, you can also just look them up here, provided it's available. I don't know why it wasn't available for 2 weeks. They didn't reply to my email, but they fixed it, and that's more important. And as I said, if you have any comments, any suggestions what I could do better or whatever, put them in the comments. I'm aware I didn't put the river shore on it, which is not fair because I did put the barrow on it, but you know it's there and it is displayed. Oops. I have nothing against the river shore. It's not a bias or like a Kilkenny person bias against the river shore. Not to worry about that. So thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you again in another video. Stay tuned and slán go fóill.